Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Becky, and I'm the Chief Exec of the English Association, and I'm really pleased to be hosting this afternoon's session on writing for pleasure. I'll just give you a quick word about the English Association. We are a learned society and a subject association, which was founded in 1906 to promote, support, and celebrate the discipline of English studies. We cover all stages of education, from primary and early years through to secondary and further education to higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to Phil and Ross for giving us their time so generously this afternoon. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £53 to support our events and campaigning work for a whole year, and you get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all our journals. And that is enough from me. So it's now my genuine pleasure to hand over to tonight's speakers for our discussion about writing for pleasure. Phil, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Becky, for that introduction. And thank you very much for inviting us to speak this afternoon. We always love talking about writing for pleasure, so we're set to enjoy it. Ross and I have been working together for a number of years now. We are the founders of the Writing for Pleasure Centre. We've managed to write 2 published books. We're authors of Research and Evidence-Based Writing for Pleasure Pedagogy. We write extensively about writing and writing teaching, and we keep up with new research. We pursue our own research, and we run training courses for schools in the UK. So as you can see, we are fairly busy. We've always been very aware of what the National Literacy Trust surveys have been telling us year on year about how pupils are persistently underachieving in writing and certainly not enjoying any of it either. It's a really sad state of affairs. And I would like to start by saying that we do what we do because although we know that making change can be really hard, we firmly believe that it is possible to reverse this dire situation. And that's what we direct all our time and all our energy and all our effort and all our work towards doing. So we actually were in the classroom not so very long ago as teachers. And at that time, we knew really well that we were teaching writing so badly and that what we didn't have was an approach and a pedagogy that would help children have a strong sense of themselves as genuine writers who would actually feel pleasure in writing because they were confident, because they were competent, and because they were highly motivated to write well, make meaning, and share it with others. And we knew that we weren't giving children this kind of writing apprenticeship, and they did deserve it so much, these children. And this began to weigh on our minds, and we began to feel very uncomfortable about it. Well, it was obvious that none of the writing programs and schemes that were available were achieving what was needed. So we decided to help ourselves and find out for ourselves what the best performing writing teachers around the world have done and were doing. And we did this by reading a vast quantity, and I mean vast, of evidence-based research papers and case studies of outstanding teachers of writing spanning the last 50 years. And from this, we were able to establish 14 principles of world-class best practice. And we based a whole pedagogy on these findings. And this afternoon, I'm going to share now what we know about just one of these principles. And that's the impact of being a writer-teacher. And what I'm about to say applies equally to teachers in the EYFS, Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3. And it isn't only relevant for teachers, but importantly, it's really relevant for teaching assistants as well. So what is a writer-teacher? I think you'd probably agree with me that most of us are very likely to define ourselves as readers, but far fewer of us perceive ourselves as writers. The reasons for this are mostly historical, and they usually have to do with the writing experiences you had when you were at school. Our definition of a teacher is simply a teacher who is able to identify as a writer. Simple as that. If you like measurements, extensive research consistently shows that being a writer-teacher has a significant effect on the quality of your writing teaching and on the achievement of your pupils in writing, especially if you adopt other research-based practices. So I can tell you that where 0.4 is a significantly positive measurement of effectiveness, the overall effect size related to being a writer-teacher is 0.54, which is a lot up on 0.4, but the effect size for children with SEND is a massive 2.48. So it really, really does make a difference to them. And funnily enough, we attended a talk last night online, which was given by a teacher, a SENCO, in a London school. We have worked with the school, and he came online to tell us that the impact of being a writer-teacher was absolutely massive on the children with autism, of who there are quite a few in the school. He works very much with children with autism, and he was able to say that the impact was absolutely huge, and that they began to feel themselves as writers. Their attitude to writing changed, their sort of willingness to participate, their willingness to share changed. So we were very pleased to hear that, you know, that actually his experience confirmed the research utterly. So if we had we have the first slide, that's great. This is a sort of rationale really for developing yourself as a writer-teacher. And I don't think there'd be any surprises here. So number one, it's hard to teach writing if you don't write yourself. That's fairly straightforward, isn't it? As a very great educator called Donald Graves said, I'm sure you've heard of Donald Graves, just as it would be hard to teach children the tuba if you've never played one yourself, so it's difficult to teach children to be writers if you never write yourself. So the second one is a sort of an elaboration on this, really. Enrich the quality of your instruction by being an authentic role model. Having an insider's knowledge about writing and being a writer allows you to bring your own writing life into the classroom and use it as a learning tool. So if you use your own experience of writing in your practice, you'll find that the quality of your instruction really is enriched, because you'll be able to be utterly authentic in the advice and support you can give. And your children will see you as a genuine writer and a role model, and they'll come to trust you as such. So already it's having a little impact on the relationship between teachers and children, I think, and that will be borne out in whatever else I have to say. So point 3, improve your own subject knowledge and gain confidence as a teacher of writing. So as well as through reading, through writing yourself, you'll inevitably improve your own subject knowledge. And I'm thinking of things like your knowledge of genre, your knowledge of grammar, your knowledge of sentence construction, your knowledge of literary techniques. And this will clearly increase your own confidence and contribute to your efficacy. But also it'll increase your own enjoyment, I guarantee that. And because reading and writing are so closely intertwined, you'll find yourself becoming adept at something that we call reading as a writer. Seeing what craft moves other writers have made in their writing to make their pieces successful and memorable, then using them in your own writing and passing them on to children. So, point 4, understand your own young writer's challenges, difficulties and successes because you're experiencing them yourself. You'll understand your young writers because you will have shared the same challenges and the same successes that they will experience. We know from talking to and questioning many children how much they really appreciate knowing this. and how much they gain from this kind of empathetic relationship with their teacher, which is another way in which relationships change. So number 5, be enabled to enact best practices in all your writing teaching. In fact, if you want to teach according to best practice, I would say that you absolutely need to be a writer teacher. No question about it. Best practice includes things like delivering effective mini lessons, which have to be short, they have to be succinct, they have to be elegant, they have to be highly specific and highly focused. You also need to explain the function of the particular item you're teaching in the mini lesson. So you can see how being a writer teacher and having an insight of knowledge contributes to that. Another example of best practice is giving high quality, responsive, live verbal feedback during pupil conferencing. And again, you'll see how it's vital to be a writer teacher here. Another best practice aspect is reading, talking, and thinking about writing, both generally and with reference to particular writing issues. And another is facilitating meaningful and productive sharing sessions, where children share their writing with each other and they get constructive evidence and feedback from their peers. So you see, being a writer teacher actually sets you up to improve all aspects of your writing teaching practice. It's totally central. And then the last one, write for pleasure yourself. Pass on your enjoyment, motivation, and enthusiasm to your class. I really like this one. You might come to writing for your own reasons and your own pleasure from starting just as a writer teacher. And this can be personally enriching. We know that it improves well-being. And obviously, conveying your enthusiasm, enjoyment, and motivation has a positive impact on your community of writers. And I would just like to stress here that everything I am saying is based on and borne out by evidence-based research. Everything we say is based on research. So if we could have the next slide. How to use your own writing life as a practical learning tool in the classroom. So, first one, write and share your own mentor texts related to different writing projects. So, pieces relating to the projects you're asking the children to undertake. Every project needs mentor texts. If you're asking children to write a newspaper report, you provide some newspaper reports as mentor texts. If you want children to write poetry, you present them with loads and loads of poetry. All makes sense. So the pieces you write as mentor texts will be some of the mentor texts you can use at the beginning of every project. And you'll need to ensure that they do match the kind of writing that you want your students to be doing. So, for example, if you wanted a class of young writers to write a 6-page picture book, a storybook, then the piece that you need to write has got to be a 6-page storybook as well, and not some great long developed story. It has to be something that the children are going to understand and be able to achieve. Writing them yourself allows you to model the textual features in your piece that you want the children to apply in theirs. You can share the different strategies you employ in your writing. You can show children that you too face the same challenges that they do. You can maintain this atmosphere of mutual respect, and you can convey your own enthusiasm and engagement to the children. And all these, I would say, contribute to making your instruction highly effective. Writing your own mentor text is a really good way to start developing yourself as a writer. I can speak from experience here. Apart from it being a personally enjoyable thing to do, when you read them with your class, you can invite their questions, you can explain your intentions, you can tell them about your challenges and successes, you can reveal all your little secrets about how you made it. Children love seeing you as a genuine writer who writes things just for them. And they'll respect you as a real writer who can give them the best advice and support that's out there. So, point 2, find a short time in class when you write alongside children, pursuing your own personal writing, the writing you do for pleasure. This really does strengthen the idea of everyone, including you yourself, being part of a community of writers. Children will be curious to know what you're writing about. They may even offer you some advice and even some commiseration. We found in our own teaching that it's possible to find a little time to continue with your own writing as children are writing theirs. A good time seems to be 5 minutes at the start of drafting time. You can do your own bit of writing there. You can have your eye on the class to see how they're getting on with theirs. And you must always be prepared to share your writing. You must never shy away from exposing your own uncertainties and your own vulnerabilities. I read somewhere recently that being vulnerable can sometimes be very powerful. And indeed it can be. Number 3, organise occasional extended sessions to share a piece of your own writing with the whole class. This is a variation on the second point, really. Children can be invited to ask any questions they like about a piece of your writing. You can seek suggestions for improvement from them. You can ask their advice and they will give it. These last 3 points really show how it is possible to turn your class into that community of writers in which every single person feels they belong and nobody's left out. And that one is another of the 14 principles of best practice. Illustrate your mini lessons with examples of what you're doing or have done in your own writing. I think I've explained mini lessons to you. I mean, they are the nub of your teaching for every writing session that you take. They have to be short. They have to be focused. They have to be succinct for many, many reasons. And it's shown that a good mini lesson, well delivered, has an incredibly positive effect on children's writing outcomes. You can show them, as I said, your own bit. You can illustrate your mini lesson with little pieces from your own writer's notebook, and you can tell children, you know, how you came up with this idea and how you've done it. And point 5, I think, needs no explanation. Read, think, share, and talk about writing. If you're a writer teacher, you can really immerse yourself into the practice and the feelings about writing and share them with the kids. That again is another principle of best practice. Read, think, share, and talk about writing. So, how to prepare yourself to be one? Well, many of our writing for pleasure teachers didn't start out as habitual or volitional writers, but they've all developed themselves as writer teachers. Of course, being a writer teacher doesn't mean that you have to write to something approaching a professional standard. We don't mean that. However, it does mean that you need to get into the habit of writing regularly, maybe only for yourself, maybe only for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. The secret really seems to be regular practice, and practicing and writing initially without the constraint of an audience being there. We have got a very good example of a writing for pleasure teacher, a friend of ours who became a writer for pleasure teacher. He started out as somebody who rarely wrote for his own pleasure. He was actually much more turned on to being an artist and drawing than he ever was to writing. So from that position of not actually being a natural writer, he followed the advice of a writing educator called Peter Elbow that you might also have heard of. He wrote this fabulous book called Writing Without Teachers, which I would recommend everybody to read if possible. So he began a routine of free writing for 10 minutes a day, really low stakes and without the constraint of an audience. He wrote about whatever came to mind, and he's written all about this on our website. If you're interested to read it, it's there on our website. He said he came to feel like a writer because he was so often engaged in it, and he actually began to find this pleasurable. He found that over time, the regular practice became liberating. Anxiety around what to write and how to write it decreased, and it made him more at ease with bringing his writing into the classroom and sharing it. Interestingly, I think he said that he began to look at life differently, mining it for material. I mean, he used the whole of life as a kind of copy. And he said he became alert to writing. That was the phrase he used, which I thought was lovely. He said he was always aware of moments that sparked, I could write about that. He always had a little notebook to jot down ideas as they came to him, or he used his phone. So, one advice I would give to you, if you want to have writing for teachers, writing writers in your school and among your teaching assistants, always make sure that every teacher has a notebook with them in the class writing session. Never let anybody tell you that they didn't have their notebook so they couldn't write anything this time. Everybody always needs a notebook with them because they are actually going to write alongside the children. And they need to have their notebook to hand so they can write in it and actually be showing the children what they're doing, discussing it with them. So I think that's probably enough for me. I'm going to hand over to Ross in just a moment. He's going to convince you that even the very youngest of children are ready to be autonomous and engaged writers who make and share meaning through making books of their own. And I'm absolutely sure that he will be bringing in little pieces about how writer teachers have contributed to children's successful bookmaking. So thank you very much for listening, and I will now hand over to Ross.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phil. So I'm going to start by reading you a little story, and it's by a boy called Wyatt. And Wyatt he comes from an economically underserved area of Leeds. He's in nursery. Bless his little heart, he arrived late to nursery, so his friends had already had a couple of weeks of nursery, and he arrived, and this is his very first day of nursery. Everyone sat on the carpet hearing about this thing called bookmaking, and he's had to just sort of keep up and see what's occurring. And this is what he did in his first ever session. This is his first ever published text, and it's called Untitled by Wyatt. If you're sitting comfortably, I will begin. Okay, so this is an alien with 2 eyes and no legs. And we've got a picture of the alien, and then we've got what's called emergent writing underneath. Look, Wyatt read to me. He rolls up into a ball. Then there was a dinosaur. Look at that dinosaur. That is a great dinosaur. It is big. It is scary. I really found this interesting because we've got 2 separate bits of emergent writing for his 2 sentences, his 2 complete thoughts. Clever Wyatt. The alien rolled up in a ball. Look, he's rolling faster. This is my favourite page. He's rolling, 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 rolling. That's how Wyatt read it to me. Super fast now. He jumps at the dinosaur because he's very excited. The alien covers the dinosaur up. The alien is by himself. The end. so excited to have a friend, a dinosaur, he ended up eating his one and only friend through sheer excitement. So that is Wyatt's first ever book that he made in nursery. He wasn't given a story mountain. He wasn't given sentence starters. He was given a blank book and asked to do a picture and some writing on every page. And he went off and he watched what his friends were doing at first to get sort of a bit of confidence, and then away he went. So what was going on then? So this is what was happening in his Writing for Pleasure school in Leeds. And what they were doing to try and develop the children's writing fluency in the EYFS is the first thing the teachers did was they would accept children's emergent writing. So we saw Wyatt was using kind of mock handwriting, scribble writing, and then he had his picture above. So that's the first stage. He'll have that for a number of terms until phonics is introduced. And then what we see is that emergent writing starts to transform before our very eyes over days, weeks, and months. And more what we call adult writing starts to appear in that emergent writing. That's linked, that phonics instruction is then linked to teaching children encoding strategies. So as Phil was saying, the teachers will sit the children down and say, when I was your age, I couldn't write like an adult. I can write like an adult now, but when I was your age, I used this thing called kid writing. And it was when I used a mixture of adult writing and my own writing to write stuff down. And that's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to teach you just how I was taught. And when you get older, you'll be able to write like an adult too. So we teach children encoding strategies, how to listen out for the sounds that they do know in the words they want to write down, write those words, write those letters down, transcribe them onto the page. And if you're not sure, you can do a little bit of a scribble as a stopgap. Linked to that then is naturally going to be letter formation instruction. And then finally, we can teach at the sentence level as well. Okay. The key here is that when we are doing that letter formation instruction and sentence level instruction and those encoding strategies, the children actually want to bloom in here about these strategies because they actually want to go off and make books. So it's all authentic and purposeful. It's not just being done onto them. Okay, so there's always links in our schools with the teachers saying, all this stuff I'm teaching you about, you can use in your bookmaking each day. Really, really important. Okay. So yeah, this is one of the key lessons that's taught very, very early on in either nursery or reception, and it's called kid writing. And what we do is we make sure that every single child in our nurseries or receptions feels like they can participate in writing from the very first day they arrive. And to do that, we have to basically say, do you know what? The emergent writing that some of you may or may not have been doing at home, you can use that in school as well. It's all right. I'm not going to try and make you write like an adult when you're only 3 years old. I wouldn't do that to you. Okay, you can use your kid writing. And that's exactly what I used when I was your age. And that's very reassuring for the kids. And so what you can do, you can create a poster. This is our poster. You adapt it based on what you're seeing your children doing. But the key thing is you want your kid writing to look like the writing that your least experienced writer in your room is doing, because then straight away they feel like, oh, phew, okay, won't get in trouble for using kid writing. And you can reassure them that you're going to teach them to write more and more like adults as the year progresses. Lovely. Okay. And then linked to that then, the second very profound lesson that's taught very, very early on is how to make books. And Felicity and I have figured that there is a very sensible, developmentally appropriate writer's process for the EYFS. Shame Ofsted haven't heard about it, but there we go. So the research shows this is utterly developmentally appropriate because it brings oral language and listening comprehension to the writer's process. And we know that children's oral language is the biggest predictor of future writing success in the EYFS. So it might be a good idea to bring that to bookmaking. And then drawing. Drawing is the great what's the word I'm looking for? It's the great equalizer. It allows every single child to come and participate. You don't need to have great, fantastic, super duper fine or gross motor skills to take part. You saw Wyatt's drawings. They're rudimentary, but I quite liked them actually. I thought they had a lot of character. All right. So then we get them to draw, just like Wyatt did. And then underneath his drawing, he'd hid his kid writing, and then he shared it. Another very profound lesson that they're taught is to tickle their writing. So we're always bringing the kids back to the print. We're always bringing them back to that emergent writing. And Wyatt would wiggle his finger underneath his text, and he read it to me. So he went, he's rolling, 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 rolling. Okay. And then that's how I knew what it said. And then I privately wrote that down in my little journal. I didn't write it on his writing, obviously, because that would be me telling him, you didn't write it like an adult, you idiot. I've had to come in and do it for you. That's really going to get him down, isn't it? Okay, so let's not do that. Okay, so a recommended writing process, but to be perfectly honest, this is a beautiful writing process, whether you're 3 or 103. I think it's just a lovely writer's process to talk, to draw, to write about those drawings, and then share your book. Okay. And so we could see that, bless poor little Wyatt, his friends had already been taught these 2 strategies, but he very quickly picked them up anyway, as you saw. So very early on in the year, children are taught to put some writing and a picture on every page, and they're taught to make their drawing, to tell their drawing, either out loud to themselves in what's called egocentric speech. Anyone that's worked in EYFS knows about egocentric speech. They love talking to themselves. Or they can tell their drawing to their pals, and then they write about that drawing underneath. 2 really great early writing strategies there. They still work for me. I'm 37. They work just fine. Good strategies. And that is it. That was a little whistle-stop tour of how to do bookmaking in the EYFS. I was told to keep it very short. I think I've managed it. 10 minutes left. We can all go have a nice cup of tea and go home. So I think it's Q&A now, Phil, which you asked for. So thank you for listening.
Okay.
A lot of shock, a lot of disbelief, but a lot of pride as well in the fact that being paid, these 100 boys, lots of people have been chatting to, have had some sort of.
You can see that Vicky has put in the chat. She loves that Wyatt was given an opportunity to tell his story and for it to be valued. That comes through quite really strongly in what you're saying, that it's the valuing of it as well that's very important.
Yeah. And just a really sad atmosphere, especially around the university, where so many people
Any other questions?
have been all raised eventually to One Direction being.
Is there anyone out there that does regard themselves as a writer teacher?
Not fully, but oh, hello, I'm Zoe. I work in Year 4. No, I've really enjoyed that actually. Thank you. That goes with a lot of things that I've read already, but also there was some new things as well. So that was really useful. The whole thing about sharing your writing, I'd just say that is so powerful for certain, because I literally did that a few weeks ago, just from my modelled writing with before, and we were all doing that whole sort of writing buddies and critiquing each other's writing. And I sat in the author chair first, and they did mine. And actually, I was really amazed at how much I got from them, as opposed to actually if it had been a child who had sat in the chair first. And I'm a really experienced teacher, so I've done a lot of that kind of thing. But it really sort of surprised me, actually, just me sitting there going, right, is there anything that you think I could improve, or just about what I'd written as the model? Yeah, it was really good. And that's weirdly, that was one of the first times I've sort of actually done that, where it's me reading mine like that and starting them off. So the proof is in the pudding. It definitely does work.
Yes. Well, that's really nice to hear. That sort of confirms, you're on the right lines, aren't you? I mean, you're doing this wonderful piece of best practice. that will filter through to all your other writing teaching as well. So it's great to hear that.
You'll never have nicer critics.
Well,
Children are incredibly kind and
Yeah,
careful. It's adults that are the problem.
Yeah.
Adults are
yeah,
the
they
mean-spirited.
were quite direct, actually. I love to say, but it was good because it through my writing, I think it really made it actually then impacted theirs just in a much kind of quicker, easier way. It is really powerful. It definitely works. Yes. I wanted to ask about that kids writing. Is that sort of the term that the schools that are following this, is that what they're using? You know, with the poster or
Yeah, they can come up with whatever term they like. They can call
Right.
it children's writing, kid writing, play writing. You can call it whatever you like.
grown
What
up
you want to do
writing.
is, you just want to make that distinction between the emergent writing and then what we call adult conventional writing. And you just want to say, look, you don't have to write conventionally like an adult when you're 3 years old. Basically, that's the messaging. Whatever you want to call it, it's up to you.
Yeah. Have you got any recommendations of schools where this is happening like well?
If you email us, we'll send through a little list.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat. So Dora asks, I was wondering if there is any advice around how much time should be given to mentor text, more process-driven writing, versus free writing, as shown in Wyatt's example.
When we plan a project, part of the first week you are setting up the genre, you're setting up the project, and you're familiarizing children with the genre. And it's during that first week that you can spend 1 day, 2 days, possibly even 3 days, if you like, looking at mentor texts. So maybe that answers the question that mentor texts are incredibly important. And because, of course, from the mentor text, children will generate their success criteria list with you. I mean, it has to be collaborative with you. But it's from the mentor text that children will get a sort of blueprint of all the things that they will need to do in their writing to make it successful. So I'm not sure where the question about free writing came in.
Yeah, I could answer that, Phil, if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the question asker. What I'm wondering is in schools, in the curriculum, it's very much mentor text driven rather than giving the blank page. And I was just wondering how much, we should be spending time on that process driven mentor text, immersing, analysing and all the rest of it, or just giving the blank page and maybe, like an image stimulus and saying off you go, or whatever the stimulus is. Because really, if you're only approaching the blank page, that's when you're being a true writer, to my mind, because it's coming from you. But I feel that schools really focus in on the mentor text and give very little time to the blank page. But that's why I was interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. When we looked at the case studies of the best performing writing teachers, the way they organised their writing units and their individual writing lessons was so bloody clever. It's like just far more clever than Phil and I were when we were teaching. When we read it, we were just like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. How could we have been so stupid? But what they did is when they set up an hour's lesson for writing, they were actually secretly thinking, this should only take my kids about 20 minutes, half an hour to actually achieve. And then I've got some wiggle room. I've got half an hour or 20 minutes left over. And once the children had achieved what they called the process goal, the children used the rest of the writing session to work on a personal writing project. And they were so clever, they would also allow those personal writing project journals to go home. So the kids would carry on working on them at home and then bring them back into school, work on them at school, take them back home every day. So they were keeping touch with these personal projects like a real writer does. They were building this writer's discipline. And then, of course, now and again, you know, if you're slightly ahead in a unit, or the next door have gone swimming, or they've gone on a trip, or you just want to have a little break from the class project, these teachers would just give the kids a personal writing project session. And then that freed the teacher up to go round and spend quality time with the kids and ask them how they were getting on with these personal projects, which I thought was so damn clever.
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting approach. Because obviously, the more I read, research, etc., the more I feel like the personal projects are where the real motivation lies, rather than mimicking a mentor text. But, you know, I know there's place for both, but I feel the weight's a bit too much towards mentor text and mimicry rather than actual personal project writing.
I love what you're saying, though, Dora, because you picked up on a massive problem, which is often schools are using a single text to drive their writing units. But actually what Felicity and I are saying, and when we look at the research, is we actually want to marinate kids in loads and loads and loads of mentor text over a number of days. So we want just piles of information books all over the children's tables, and they really read loads and loads and loads of them. And then they just soak it all up like sponges, rather than having to slavishly copy a single text, which is what often happens in lots of the commercial schemes out there. Yeah, because there's lots of money to be made, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And they do need instruction. I mean, you can't just let them loose all the time. You have to give them some sort of instruction. And the mentor texts do what they say, which is they teach you.
I agree, but then I also think about the place for revision from the personal project, and the teaching coming at the point of the instruction, coming at the point of need from their own writing. That's sort of thoughts I'm exploring as well.
Yes, well, that comes under pupil conferencing, of course, you know, that you conference children all the while when they're writing. And so you're able to have a really good insight into their personal writing, really, and instruct them in the context of that too.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
We've just got a couple of lovely comments in the chat. So Dagmar says, having their own books to write and draw in motivates and encourages children to start mark making and eventually writing. Great for their confidence. Vicky adds, I have a writing notebook and write with the children, year 2. The children love it. They're always interested in what I'm writing, and they're very encouraging. They become the expert and offer advice. It's great to hear. Oh, and Sarah snuck one in right at the end. She says, the teacher modelling and pupil feedback contributes to the pupils becoming familiar with the strategies and skills needed for effective peer-to-peer feedback too, which is so useful. That's actually a lovely comment to stop for this afternoon on. So thank you very much, Sarah, for drawing us to a close with that. Well, it's my pleasure to thank Phil and Ross for this wonderful presentation. I was feverishly taking notes. I have a 3-year-old who's going to be making books now. This is what we're going to be doing. So thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for coming along and listening and joining the conversation. It's wonderful to all be gathered together. We run events like this all the time, so keep an eye on our events page, and I hope to welcome you back to another one soon. But I will now let you go to enjoy your evenings, and thank you again to Phil and Ross. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.